And it is now time for our Prime Focus, our first guest here. When we talk about multiculturalism, many people have been alarmed by what took place in Norway. Joining us is someone with first-hand experience of residing in Korea and maybe some of the negative experiences he had dealing with Korea's reaction to multiculturalism. Joining us from India right now over the phone to share his experience is Bonojit Hussain. Hello.
Hello.
Sir, thank you very much for joining us here on Primetime.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Now, your experience in Korea made headlines for days, and this occurred quite a while back. I remember you being on the morning program of our network, but for those of us who may not recall this incident, can you briefly outline what happened?
Yeah, sure. It was, I think, way back in 2009, June. I was in a bus, a public bus, going from Seoul to Bucheon in the evening with one of my Korean colleagues. Mm-hmm. So me and my Korean colleagues were, discussing something on the bus, and there was this person, a white-collared person, not very old, not very young.
Okay.
He suddenly started yelling at us, and then he called me a black bastard and an Arab. I mean, he confused his categories. Sometimes he called me Arab, sometimes a black bastard. Then he said, "You smell like shit. What are you doing in Korea?" And it went on, and then he started abusing my Korean colleague. And when she protested, he in fact got violent, and he physically assaulted her. Then we asked the bus driver to take us to the police station, and finally we reached the police headquarters in Bucheon. But the police simply refused to register our case, and he in fact, the police officer told me that, you were creating trouble on a public space, on a bus, so you were also at fault, so just say sorry to each other. I said, no way. I mean, I want to lodge my complaint. And then the police did not believe my alien registration card, and they could not believe that, somebody who looks like a migrant factory worker could be a research professor in a university. But we insisted, and we had to go through a lot throughout the night, and finally, almost it was 3 a.m. in the morning, we kind of managed to file the case. And there was lots of public attention. The media pitched in, the international media also covered it, and the prosecution's office was under lots of pressure. Mm-hmm. So the person was indicted. And I had also filed the case against the police department in the National Human Rights Commission. And much later, the National Human Rights Commission also kind of retributed the police department.
Yeah, a couple of things jump out when you hear this is, of course, you are a scholar, a professor, and we're not even talking about the treatment that many migrant workers who come to Korea to work experience. Was this an isolated incident in your case, Professor, or was this something that was just really the most dramatic, but there were other slights along the way?
Well, I don't think it was an isolated incident because my work was also related to, multiculturalism and question of democracy. So I used to interact a lot with migrant factory workers. And it was not surprising that the first reaction they gave me regarding my case was that this is nothing. I mean, we face worst situations. The thing that I was located in a university, I could insist and spend the whole night in a police station and insist that my case be registered. I'm sure my case was nothing compared to what many of the migrant workers go through.
How many years did you spend in Korea?
I was there for a little over 3 years.
Did you notice any subtle or perceptive shifts in attitudes, generally speaking, among Koreans towards you or other foreigners, for the better or worse, during your time here?
Well, it was kind of a mixed experience. I was never saying that the whole of Korean society is, discriminative or things like that. But there I could see a kind of even in my everyday experiences, traveling the subway or in the bus, I mean, there are certain kind of discriminations you face. Like, even in the rush hour, nobody would sit next to you.
Right.
So it's a mixed bag.
Now, it's interesting how you pointed out, and I think you did this intentionally, that the man who was verbally abusing you on the bus that fateful day, as you termed a white-collar person, neither really old or very young. There isn't any key demographic group that necessarily is more abusive than others, right, among Koreans, right, whether it's educated or non-educated or young or old, right?
Yeah, well, actually, why I mentioned white collar, not so young, not so old, is that the usual, answer that is given to you is that, all this old Korean ajosi, they are drunk on soju, that's why they do it, they have provincial mentality. The point I'm trying to make is that it's not simply provincial mentality. I mean, this person was a white-collared company-going executive. I mean, he did not. I couldn't see any provincial, attitude in him. Or I mean, he was not a drunk ajosi, old ajosi who just, got furious and started shouting and abusing us.
Okay, and that is a point that you are indeed making here, and I guess the lesson of it is ignorance is ignorance, and it doesn't really matter what your socioeconomic background is. You can be ignorant or you can be enlightened, and that really lies with that particular individual and their, openness or lack thereof in terms of attitude. You are back in India right now, and I think one thing that we're curious about is India, I think, maybe to the surprise of some people, is a very, very diverse country. How does India, do you feel, handle matters of multiculturalism vis-a-vis Korea?
As you already said, I mean, it's a very, very diverse country, so the issue is quite complex in India as well. I mean, we usually grow up learning more than one languages, like I speak 5 languages. And, India, constitutionally, we have 22 official languages, and in terms of ethnicity, it runs into thousands. So some elements of multiculturalism is already imbibed into us. We are born into a multicultural milieu. But at the same time, in the beginning, you mentioned that this Norwegian killer, he had in fact said that his model of Europe is South Korea or Japan. But again, in his manifesto, he said something else as well. He said that, the Indian Hindu nationalist movement can be a key ally in a global struggle to bring down democratic regimes across the world. I am quoting from his manifesto. So we similarly have a problem here. Over the last 30 years, the right-wing Hindu nationalist movement has grown stronger and stronger, and they are completely anti-multicultural. I mean, they want to turn India into a homogenized nation in terms of religious identity. I mean, that's a big challenge we are facing, the democratic forces in India are facing. But at the same time, we also have in many parts of India caste operating at the ground, even though 60 years ago it was made illegal in our constitution. But still caste practices are very much there in certain pockets of India. So in a way, Korea is trying to evolve towards a multicultural society, and Korea is facing challenges in it. Our situation is exactly the opposite. We have movements here which wants to revert or rather undo the multicultural aspects which we are born into.
Right.
So there are attempts at homogenization going on in India as well.
I think that's an interesting comparison you're making. The struggle for perhaps enlightenment and open-mindedness in Korea, that is a path that is Korea must be taking slowly but surely. But then in India, on the flip side, traditionally multicultural, but this fear of regression, right, back to perhaps a less tolerant society. I guess we are almost out of time. In terms of Korea, and I know that you are now back home, and you maybe look back in Korea as your experience, both perhaps some very negative experiences, but also some fond memories, I'm sure, as well.
Sure.
What path do you think Korea and Koreans should take?
Well, I think I have said this earlier also in different media. I think one of the crucial thing is to be multiculturalism means you respect difference, and you might disagree, but you respect difference. So only governmental policies are not enough. There has to be a general kind of holistic educational policy right from the primary school level, elementary school level. I mean, I've seen textbooks in Korea. I mean, there's hardly anything about Asian history or African history or Latin American history. So obviously, young students in Korea, they get to know hardly anything except from TV or maybe the internet, which is not sufficient. So I think pedagogically, education, especially at the school level, is a very important element. The government has to focus on how to broaden the scope of education in schools in Korea. I think that will be the key factor which will decide how multicultural can Korea become in the future.
Yeah, very interesting points there. And Professor, I want to thank you very much for spending time with us and sharing your unique experiences. I think we all learned a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was Professor Bonojit Hussain giving us his experiences regarding multiculturalism and his acceptance in Korean society. We're going to get some more expert opinion on this coming up. Another professor, in fact, from the Center of Multicultural Education in Gyeonggi-do. That's up next.